All right, so welcome to a conversation about the mental side of long distance running. For those listening and watching, I'm Natalia Hawthorn from Streamline Athletes, and I'm excited to be joined here today by Ben Flanagan and Isaac Woods. How's it going, guys?
Oh, it's always good talking with you, Natalia, and Mr. Isaac as well. So love a good track and field banter with the man himself of the Wood Report. So I'm pumped to be here.
You know what? This is going to be really fun, and looking forward to chatting with people who know more than me about all, so I can learn from them. It's going to be fun.
Fantastic. Well, I'm very excited to be here too. And before we get into it, I think we'll give our listeners a little bit of a background. I'm sure these are familiar names, Ben and Isaac, but we'll just go over in case. So, Ben, you grew up in Ontario, Canada, and you competed at Michigan University, where you went on to become, NCAA Division One 10,000 meter champ in 2018. But more importantly, you became the NCAA certified mama's boy. So, Ben, I was wondering if you could just tell us the story about, behind the scenes, how you claimed that title and what you're currently up to today.
Yeah. Oh man. That is it never gets old. It never gets old. But so yeah, I had an amazing time. My experience in college at the University of Michigan, and I was coached by Kevin Sullivan there, who is, a big idol of mine. And, you know, my whole collegiate experience, to save, a long story short, was a bit of a roller coaster, ups and downs, injuries, some moments of glory. And, I took the lessons I learned throughout my collegiate experience, and they all culminated in the last race of my collegiate career at the NCAA championships, where I was fortunate to win NCAA title, biggest race of my life for sure. And, on cameras on ESPN, for some reason, the first thing that came to my mind is saying, where's my mom? And one of those moments that I didn't even realize I said it. I didn't think twice about it until I checked my Twitter account about 30 minutes later and had a retweet from Shalane Flanagan. And the rest was history. And for now that's the way it goes. I'm the NCAA mama's boy. I'm a proud to say it. I love my mom, so it's no problem for me one bit.
Oh, I love that, Ben. And so today you're still running. Can you touch on that a little bit? What you're up to, where you're training, and where you're working too?
100%. Yeah. So trying to keep things busy. That opportunity at NCAA's really opened the door for me to continue my career professionally, which was always a dream of mine. So shortly after that race, I explored the option of signing a contract to run pro. Ended up joining the Reebok Boston Track Club under the sponsorship of Reebok, and am training with them still to this day and competing, across North America and internationally for them as well. Right now, trying to pursue my first Olympic berth for Team Canada at the Olympics in Tokyo. But yeah, so when I'm not running miles and training hard, I'm working with Streamline Athletes, and I'm working hard instead on the computer and communicating with coaches every day. And yeah, it's awesome. My job there is to, really build relationship with coaches, learn about their programs and their recruiting, and really see if they can utilize the tools that we have to help support their recruiting across North America, and connect with athletes as well, and educate them in what we do. So it's a really cool job for me, and I just love navigating the running world from that perspective as well.
And I should have mentioned too that it's a pleasure to work with Ben at Streamline Athletes too. I work as a partnerships coordinator and also run competitively today for Brooks Running. And it's a small world. Ben and I, we actually both grew up in the same province in Canada, Ontario, and knew each other from competing at our provincial championships, OFSA, and just the close-knit kind of running community in Canada there as well. So, like I mentioned, I ran two and I made my way out to stay in Canada. I competed at the University of British Columbia. So, they competed in the NAI, and I've had the opportunity to run on a couple of the World Cross Country championships, including the World 2019 Championships in Denmark, which was advertised as the toughest cross country course ever seen. And it definitely lived up to its name. So excited to be speaking with you guys today about the mental aspect of our sport as well. And I want to bring in Isaac Wood today as well, who's with us. So Isaac, you've had an impactful role with BYU, most recently as their new appointed athletics director, development coordinator, sorry. And additionally, you've created the Wood Report in 2012, which is a cross-country ranking platform. I was wondering if you can share a little bit more about your background, what inspired you to start the Wood Report, and how you're able to rank cross-country, because as we know, it's a very unpredictable event compared to track and other sports out there as well.
Yeah, thanks, Natalia. Ben, I'm just stoked to be in this conversation with you both. And yeah, so I got into running through my father. Basically rode his coattails my entire career, so I really haven't really brought much value. No, I'm just kidding. But my dad, he was an agent, a sports agent for professional runners. One of the first guys to do it in the early '80s. So I grew up with Olympians coming to my house for gear and to hang out, and I don't know, I just kind of grew up in the sport. I think the only vacations we took growing up were to track meets at various places around the world. So that's how I got into the sport. And then I started the Wood Report as I kind of felt like in 2012 I was a senior in college, and I was like, okay, I don't want to be Bob Wood's kid my whole career. Like, I want to make a name for myself and figure out a way to provide value at anywhere I was coaching or working at. So I decided to kind of see if I could come up with an algorithm to predict cross country races, and it is really hard, and rarely is it that good, but it's content and it's something, and it's someone willing to put their name out there and stick their neck out on the line on a prediction. And the times that it does go well, it's awesome. And I just started the Wood Report just that way, and it was almost more of a analysis at first, and then I kind of turned it into a ranking platform. And so yeah, that's kind of how the Wood Report got started, as a kind of just me typing up my thoughts on teams, and it just kind of transitioned into, okay, I think I can actually maybe objectify this even more. And next thing you know, I've got a website and an app and a subscription service to our ranking platform that hopefully provides value to coaches and runners all throughout the NCAA. So.
Yeah, and if I can chime in for 1 second here, Isaac, I got to just give my first introduction to learning about the Wood Report, because, for anyone that knows me well, or is listening any time I've spoken on any sort of podcast or anything like that, I'm a huge track nerd myself. So the Wood Report is right up my alley. So, I remember being a freshman in college, and I think the Wood Report at that point would have been collaborated with some other companies, but the level of depth you went into in terms of the ranking, like the NCAA meet, for example, is around 250 athletes, and if I remember correctly, you went deep into that list, ranking everyone and having a legitimate reason for why someone was 151st, over the 152nd. And as an athlete in the sport, the coolest thing was seeing my name on a ranking sheet. You know what I mean? Everyone ranks the top 10, the top 5. Nationally, and as a freshman in college, where no one who I was, some random Ben Flanagan at the University of Michigan, to see my name ranked based off of some result that I ran in that I thought no one was paying attention to, was really cool and honestly really inspiring. So definitely just wanted to kind of give you that impression of my introduction to the Wood Report, and I've been following it ever since. But just the level of work you've done, and I know it's more automated now, but even like the manual, I'm sure at some point it was strictly manual, and I can't imagine the amount of work that would have taken.
Yeah, I was trying to cut down on a little bit of time by automating my processes, but there's still, every time I put out anything that has my name on it, I want my eyes on it, and I make changes. Sometimes I screw the algorithm and just say, no, that's not right. So I'll make changes based on that, because I'm like, I don't want to put my name on something that I just don't agree with. So Ben, appreciate the shout out, man. Yeah, it's been cool to hopefully play a somewhat impactful role in the college cross country scene through the Wood Report. So
yeah.
And it's built so much excitement in the cross country world too, right? Like highlighting all these athletes and just making more excitement, conversation leading up to all these collegiate cross country meets.
Yeah, and can I ask one more question? I gotta pop in for it, because I got one more Wood Report specific question that I'm dying to ask. So, was there ever a case where in the Wood Report, a lot of times when people are, watching the sport, someone has a breakthrough race. It's like, oh, who is this person? Never heard their name in my life. But I imagine, going so deep in the results like you do, you've probably seen some people that look like they came out of the woodwork that really, may have some performance that led up to it that could have been overlooked. I'm curious from that perspective, if there's any athletes that come to mind where you're like, oh, I kind of knew that was coming, but no one else did. In my mind, Weiser is a great example of someone who just came on the scene spontaneously. And I'm wondering if you knew anyone deep in that list that came out of nowhere that was, that you maybe could have predicted.
Yeah, that's a good one. There's probably a few that come to mind. One of the ones that I really liked, and it made me think of your time, Natalia, in Aarhus, Denmark, was Patrick Dever of Tulsa, who when he signed at Tulsa, I don't think they didn't really make any hoopla about it, but I noticed that he had signed there, and so I looked up what he did, and I think he had beaten or been right with Matt Baxter of NAU at World Cross, and I'm like, man, if you can be in that mix in that horrible course, right?
Oh, yeah.
This guy's got to be legit. And so I was pretty high on Tulsa last year. At least I was high on Dever. Maybe his teammates, I'm sure, probably think I wasn't as high on them. But I was pretty high on Dever, and I was not surprised at all last year or this year when he was, I think, top 12 or 15, and last year and top 5 or 6 this year, I think. So that's a guy that comes to my mind for sure. And on the women's side, it's an interest. The women's rankings is always at times it can be more difficult because they the what am I trying to say here? It can be more difficult because you can have someone who is more willing to run on their own as the top girl by themselves, and they want to just train to be the best girl at a small school that you could maybe never even heard of, and then they can make the NCAA meet, and then they crush it, and no one's ever heard of them, and you're like, well, if you'd have been paying attention to maybe how they did the regionals, or how like a Hannah Reinhardt of Albany maybe is someone that I think I did well with a couple of years ago at NCAA's, and no one had even heard of her, and then she transferred to Oregon, and she's going to bust out this year on the track. That's someone that comes to my mind as well. So it is fun when you're right, but you never get any credit for being right. You usually just get crap for being wrong.
That's funny. That's pretty good. So, and Natalia, I just want to hear a quick summary of, everyone talks about how hard that course in Denmark was. I was nodding my head along with Isaac Wood, pretending I was there when I wasn't. So I actually want to hear from your perspective, how crazy was that course when you ran there in Denmark?
Yeah, of course. It was nuts. They were advertising it as, like I said, one of the toughest cross-country meets there. Courses ever created. So even prior to going to Denmark, I remember them releasing, just the course video and talking about, the 10% incline going up the roof of this museum, grass roof. And it was insane. And then on top of that, they had, they had mud pits, they incorporated water pits, they had crazy fan zones, but really running it was 2K loops. And it was literally going steep up or steep down. There was no level. And
Wow.
I remember because that was the first year they made up the mixed relays as well. So I think it was composed of 4 athletes, 2 girls, 2 guys, and they'd each run a 2K loop. And that's where it really hit us. They were so exhausted from running one loop. And then us mentally preparing that okay, we are about to go do this loop 5 times was just hard to wrap our head around when they were so exhausted after this. And it was by far the toughest race, I think, for everybody. We were all just absolutely spent after. I actually found myself in the medical tent for the second time that season.
The party tent, yeah.
Oh my goodness, yeah. But it was crazy. They had even going up the stadium roof was grass, and like I said, 10% for a few hundred meters definitely burns the legs. But through it, they had paths crossing that were just filled with sand. So then randomly you would have 5 meters of running on a beach up a hill as well. It was crazy, but they had great atmosphere. It was definitely an amazing experience, and they really tried to bring the cyclocross vibe to it. So they had a beer tent, like I said, with live DJs, and then I think they had a Viking tent as well. So very well put on event.
That's amazing.
But I think that's the last cross country race I have raced, because I missed the 2020 season and then COVID hit. So
wow.
Yeah. way to leave
Probably
it.
makes you, that race probably made you never want to run cross country again, possibly.
That's actually the real reason she hasn't run one since.
Yeah, maybe not. I don't know. It would have made me not want to run cross country ever again.
Oh man. Well, I think it made I remember hopping on the track after that and being like, "K in a 5K, 2K left of flat, like this is nothing."
Yeah,
So
I can do anything if I can run
it,
uphill in sand on a 2K loop. Yeah.
oh, 100%. So
Too
definitely
funny.
helped mental toughness, which is actually today what we're excited to talk about is that important aspect of mental toughness in sport, and especially with long distance and cross country racing, right? That we all have experience in coaching, competing in. And this year, it's been a unique year because we've also been greatly affected by COVID-19. So with our mental fortitude off the track, Ben, I'm sure you can relate, as can I, with all the, things we've been presented with disrupted training, lack of resources, difficulty accessing, and just the unknown of the season, too. So today we're going to dive into, the topic of this mental game with long distance and cross country. And great, we've got Isaac here who will be able to share some insight from coach's perspective and a ranking specialist in the cross country sport. So what he kind of looks at, and then Ben and I's experience competing in the cross country distances from a young age as well. So let's get into it, guys. And I know Ben, so being in long distance cross country, I know that's how you started off from a young age too, as we competed kind of in high school. And for me, I find I grew up with my dad who was involved in endurance sports like running, cross country skiing. So I naturally followed in his footsteps and just kind of found this love for pushing myself and kind of grinding, which was natural to me, I found. But I was wondering how you decided to get into the long distance. What kind of attracted you to the sport on that?
Yeah, that's a totally fair question. My parents, I don't think ever really knew much about track and field at all. So definitely a different perspective there. But so basically, I played hockey growing up most of my life, as most Canadians do. The only difference between me and most Canadians is I wasn't very good at it, but I kept playing anyways. I dabbled with some other sports, and I loved sports. I was competitive. I loved the team dynamic and everything like that. Honestly, it wasn't until we just did like annual track meets in maybe grade 6, 7, 8, something that comes around once a year, where I even explored running in any sort of way. And it was something that I just naturally excelled at compared to other sports that I played in, where I was more kind of just, I could make travel teams and things like that, but I was never really a big factor in any teams that I played in. So that was pretty, obviously that's motivating as a young kid being good at something. But it wasn't until I went to high school, and I have 2 older sisters that were on the St. Mary's cross country team. Their coach there was Christina Sullivan, who is a multiple-time All-American at Villanova when she competed in college herself, and amazing 800-meter runner herself. So she cultivated a really great team dynamic at St. Mary's High School. And when I was going to high school, nervous about making friends and, what I was going to do, what I was going to do with my hands walking down the hallways, nervous about everything as a high school kid. My sisters encouraged me to come up with the cross country team. And I just, I loved it. I loved the team dynamic. I had so much fun. And then that being combined with the fact that, I became an athlete that was, impactful for the team. Sully actually, who Sully is my high school coach as well as my college coach, different Sullys, but my high school Sully, she put me on the grade 10 team to, because I was going to be like a possible impact runner for them. And I ended up being our top runner by the end of the year. And, she really saw something in me. And Natalia, this is going to be, a very, this is going to tie right into your experience in running too. But I also went to high school with Jamie Fallon, who also went to Michigan and won an NCAA title. And she was an absolute phenom from a very young age, as was Natalia. So having another athlete that was excelling in the sport, along with a great mentor, and then my sisters and a great team, was just like the perfect trifecta for wanting to pursue something, with as much like passion and enthusiasm as I could. So I just fell in love with the sport, and I'm still doing it nowadays. So that's kind of how I got into it, and my high school career, and led to future steps down the road.
Mm-hmm. Definitely seems that athletes in our sport, either they found success at a young age, or just like really bonded with the community. And I think that's something unique I find compared to maybe sprinting or shorter, but long distance, like you are in like the hurt locker together, right? And that's really a bonding experience. Do you find that, Isaac, I guess, coaching long distance cross country, that it's been kind of that success at the level, or like love for the community that has gotten them into the sport?
Yeah, it's interesting. I was just having this conversation just yesterday with somebody about the fact that people who kind of become passionate about the sport or become nerdy about the sport, you can almost bank that those guys are going to or girls are going to get better because they just love it. And long distance running is so much about how, like, who just does it the longest and the healthiest. I mean, obviously there's talent that plays into that, right? Like, I'm not that talented, so if I probably couldn't just stay healthy and train consistently long enough to really be elite. But if you have, there's a certain threshold though that once you're beyond that talent wise, if you can stay healthy and stack training on top of training on top of training, you're going to get better. And the people who are able to push through those hard times are those who love it. And you either love it because you've been good at it from the time you were in the womb and your parents decided you were going to do it, or you happen to be running, in your middle school or in your junior high, gym class mile, and you're the best kid in the class, and you're like, okay, well, I guess I'm good at this. So, right, I feel like it's like one of those two, right, for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's true. And once I kind of
point, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. Yeah, once you kind of hit that cap of like your talent potential, it really goes into like, hey, who loves it, who's willing to put in the work to progress over time, which I guess kind of leads us into the question of like, what does it take to become a high performance long distance cross country athlete? And I think that's one of them, Isaac, is just like that patience and love for the sport to stay in it, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's when you, man, like it's just that passion, that drive, I think college basketball coach Rick Pitino has a book, and in his book he talked about when he was recruiting athletes, he recruited those who had the PhD, but it's not the doctorate. It was that they were poor, hungry, and driven. And I don't know if poor in terms of financial means per se, but like almost like poor in spirit, like the Bible or whatever, like someone who is humble and willing to do the work, and those who have that PhD, they can make it. Those are the kids who make it. Those are the Rory Linkletters who in high school, another Canadian, and who in high school was a good high school runner, but was not on anyone's radar, and became a multiple-time All-American and is running professionally. And he's an example of someone who has the PhD, and I think the level of just how much you love the sport and how much you almost like it becomes an obsession. It further pushes you to make it through when you're hurt or when you have bad days, because it's what you do. It kind of becomes your identity.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. And I think like through all that as well, I think you're really tested in the sport when you face like injuries at some point too, right? Which you see a ton in university careers, right? Whether it's because it's, a new balance of life with academic, social kind of freedom with that too. And I guess gets asking you the question, like, is this something I really want to do too, right? So coming up with, I guess, the why your athletes want to continue in the sport too really helps kind of push through and have success in the long distance and cross country as well. I think a big thing too is in long distance, people often think of mileage, right? That you need to have the high mileage to be successful in the sport. But obviously that's hard when you step from high school, because these athletes are coming from all different programs, bringing them on to like a new training plan. I guess, Isaac, how have you gone about that, managing all these different backgrounds and, trying to keep your athletes healthy while having, success in competition as well? I'd be surprised if there's a magic answer, but just from your experience, if you have any kind of insight to share there.
Yeah, if a coach says they have the magic answer, that's probably a big red flag.
I love that. I love that.
I think it's really hard to individualize as well though too. So there's the two spectrums of coaches who say I individualize everything you do, right?
Mhm.
And then there's those who are like, I know exactly what to do, and everyone does it, we get better. It's probably somewhere in the middle. A lot of it is imbuing trust and in your athletes, between you and the athlete, and becoming approachable enough for your athletes to want to come to you and say, like, so much of training is just it's the communication. Your coach needs to feel like they can tell you anything, and the athlete needs to feel like they can tell you anything. And so much of that transition from the high school level to the collegiate level of staying healthy and actually progressing is just that. It's the communication. It's, hey, my leg, it's just, I got maybe a little hot spot, and you're not afraid to coach. Sometimes these kids are afraid to tell the coach that, because, I might not travel, or, dang it, now I've got to go swim for a week, or, but kind of having that relationship, I think, is the best way to transition, because, you can't just, stamp and give everyone the same thing, but a lot of times too, like, I think there's, you can individualize as best as you can, but if the athletes aren't doing what they're supposed to do when they're away from the coach, they're not going to get better either.
Yeah, I would say, one thing I would add to that, Isaac, because I think you're totally right, and the individualization is important, but it's like the sport's so quantitative, right? And it's so easy to think of mileage as an objective measure, which technically it is, but it should be interpreted, relative to the athlete, right? It's like, oh, an athlete sees, oh, this athlete that's doing well is running 80 miles a week, and they imagine 80 miles as like consistent amongst all athletes, but it's really not, right? Like one athlete's 80 miles might be another 70. And, I'm a 10K guy, and the best season I had in my life, I barely broke 65 miles, which shocks a lot of people because, most 10K guys run 80, 90. And for me, I just couldn't do that while staying healthy. So I think it's so important to kind of find that line of like, okay, what's my level of working hard without crossing that line? Like, when does, mental toughness or the drive become a little too far that it ends up being counterproductive to, ultimately your physical health is probably the easiest, but also mental fatigue and other things like that. So the sustainability is so important.
Yeah, and how many times have you heard someone say, "Oh yeah, that program, yeah, they're a high mileage program." Well,
Yeah, yeah.
are they really? Like, or is that just, one kid, you follow one kid on Strava who ran 90 miles a week, and you're like, "Oh, that's a high mileage program for sure, meat grinder. Yep, avoid
Yeah.
them." How do you know? Like, and so much of that is, and one thing I've learned in my somewhat short coaching career is that getting someone to the starting line healthy is so much more important than anything they do from the macro perspective, workout wise, outside of, like, are they doing it, like, are they getting enough mileage to at least keep them aerobically fit? Are they doing enough workouts to improve their lactic threshold, and pushing their VO2 max, and their VO2 and all that physiology mumbo jumbo? like But the most important thing is get them to the starting line, because they're nothing to the program, or they're not getting anything out of the running themselves if they can't actually race. That's why you
Mhm.
do it, right?
Yeah, 100%. I think you guys both touch on great points there. That coming in, I think first year as an athlete, you put so much trust in the coach, which is great, but you have to realize like they don't have all the answers for the athlete, right? I think you touched on that, Isaac. Like the athlete, like your body, the self, your body the best. So it's really important to like vocalize how you're feeling and have that open dialogue with the coach. You can't just put all of this trust into your coach and not speak up when you do need to take a day off if your body's really hurting, or adapt a little bit. And it's not that you're going backwards, it's just you're taking one little baby step back to be able to get to that start line healthy, instead of being mentally tough, pushing through the workout and then injuring yourself for the season, which I think I'm very guilty of in my university career, because I was very, yes, kind of all or nothing mindset. It's like, let's just get through this workout like I did it, but not really realizing that I was setting myself back because I was pushing too hard too soon. So I think that's huge, just to be sustainable, like Ben, you were saying, in the sport. Like if you're pushing that hard or redlining workouts, you're just going to run yourself into the ground, right? It's like save that for competition when you can actually leave it all out there.
Yeah, and Natalia, I think college is such an interesting time for that like exploration phase because, you know, throughout all your development, you're taught that like it's all about hard work. It's all about hard work. So, you know, when you go from here to here and then, you know, you start getting closer and closer to, you know, what might be your pinnacle as an athlete, you start to really like reflect on like, okay, when do I really need to pick and choose how to productively use my hard work and my discipline and these qualities that you've cultivated throughout your development? Because, you know, if you rely solely on hard work your whole career, as you said, Natalia, and I'm certainly guilty of as well, you can end up you know, hurting yourself. And the intentions were all in the right place. Oh, I'm going as hard as possible because I want to be the best athlete I can be. But if you do that all the time and, you know, you don't give yourself the recovery you need, you know, it can end up being counterproductive and take too many steps backwards instead of really focusing on that momentum going forwards. So totally fair. And I'm guilty of it too. And I've learned lots throughout my career and hopefully don't have to learn it again, but you know, we all do our best, right?
Hey man, sometimes less is more, right? You know,
Right.
You know, I think some people take some sort of badge of honor or pride and, you know, I can do one more rep. No, don't.
Yeah, you can.
Yeah, you can, but you might
Yeah,
get hurt.
but don't.
Yeah, you
Stop
can,
it.
or you could be toast. Or you
Yeah.
can, or then you won't be able to recover as well, right?
Yeah.
So,
Mhm.
right.
No, exactly. And I think we're talking about one side of the spectrum there where it's like we're pushing it, we want to do that. Isaac, I was wondering, do you see kind of on the other spectrum where you have great, amazing, like talented athletes, but there's a little bit of struggle to mentally push themselves to that level to progress in the sport? Or do you see that when sometimes you're kind of seeing potential in an athlete who would, you know, do well in say the 5K over the 15, and what does that kind of mental approach from a coach's perspective, I guess, to help them excel in that?
Yeah, I mean, it's always easier to rein someone back than to have to get them going, right? But it's funny how it seems though that some of the most talented athletes are the ones you have to actually, you know, get going and help try to light a fire under them. So I think the best way to do that is to get them into races and get them competitive, because nothing is more deflating than a bad race when you know you haven't done the work. And but it's deflating and at the same time motivating, right? Like you almost need that. It's like, yeah, let's just throw this kid in a 1500. He's going to get wrecked in this 1500, but it's going to be okay because he or she is going to be like, all right, I need to get serious, huh? And you're like, yes, you do. And let's go, right? And then on the other hand, you know, I think the transition from the 15 to 5, it can be a difficult one, but a lot of elite college runners need to make that transition if they're going to become relevant at the next level, because most of the time you have to have a certain level of leg speed to be elite in the 15, and a lot of that is just you just got to have it. You know, you got to be able to run, you know, whatever number you want to throw out there for 400 to be able to really kick and close with the best, right? And if you can't do that, you're never going to be relevant. But Leo Manzano was relevant for years because he can kick, right?
Yeah.
Like time trial, he was never going to win anything in a time trial.
Yeah.
But he was going to outkick you, you know? And so if you don't have that level, level of leg speed, it's now then you start as a coach, you're like, okay, you can run, you know, 415, or you can run, you know, 340, but that's it. So let's bump up the mileage a little bit. Let's do a little bit longer tempos. Let's do a little more volume in your workouts. Let's throw you in a 5. Let's see how that goes. And I think yeah, that to me is the best way to approach that mental transition for someone from the 15 to 5 or any event jump is, okay, let's look at where you're at. Let's start to kind of realize, okay, I don't think I'm ever going to quite meet my goal. What's your goal? You want to do X, Y, Z? Great. That's going to happen if you go up the next event, up a distance.
Kind of reminds me of Steve Prefontaine too, not wanting to move up, but great amount of success once he went up in distance.
Exactly.
Yeah, there you go. I was going to say, I think the one thing I was going to add is when you're talking about, oh, you X to run this in the mile or the 15, sometimes you might just have an athlete that accidentally runs 355 and qualifies for the NCAA Indoor Championship too, right at BYU.
I mean, you know, sometimes people surprise you, right?
Yeah, yeah.
You know? So, you know, and those are happy surprises. Coach Ed Eyestone texted me after that race and said, that was the most surprised I've been in my entire coaching career.
Yeah.
He told me.
That was pretty fun to watch. What was his PR? going into that race again.
His PR going into that was a 4:09 1600.
Yeah.
And he ran 3:55. So
Yeah.
that's serious.
I wouldn't mind doing that every once in a while. That'd be nice.
Right.
Sounds good.
But then the expectation moving forward is you got to be that person forever, right? It's cool that you get to say that, but then you got to bring it too.
Yeah, because you're going to NCAA indoors 2 weeks from now. Yeah, and you're competing against the best. But he pulled it off well. He backed it up well at the meet.
He did great. He's learning. Yeah. He's learning a lot, and it's good. It's good. It's kind of like winning the NCAA 10K as well, right? You win the NCAA 10K, then you gotta go. You gotta be the dude. And you and Clayton Young, I think, experienced that a little bit. And good for Clayton to have a little redemption when he won the USA 15K champs a couple weeks ago, because he hadn't run anything better than 14:10 for 5K up until that point. So
yeah.
Anyway, you can move on from that, I guess. Natalia, sorry, we can get a little sidetracked here.
No
worries. It's all exciting. Well, Ben, you'll just have to channel that when you go jump in your 1500 next week.
That's true.
Yeah. It's rolling.
Yeah, exactly. Let's see how my 2 or 3 fast twitch muscle fibers left in my legs we'll see how fast they can go. So it should be good.
Oh, totally. Well, let's get into a little bit of, I guess we talked about more general. Let's talk about kind of personal experiences with the mental side and the longer distances. So with it, obviously in longer distances, you have a ton of time to think, right? What goes through your mind, Ben, do you find in longer distances? Or if you can kind of think back to when you jumped up from like the 5 to the 10K or those longer cross country races. I know for women, we recently bumped up that distance. So we were forced to quickly figure out how to mentally jump into these races. But wondering what your experience was like.
Yeah, for sure. I always joke around by saying, when I ran the first 10K of my life, I made the biggest mistake of running it well. So from that day forward, I was the 10K guy. So I remember quite clearly, opening up at my 10K, I ran 29:17, I think was the first 10K I ran out in California. And, the way I approach that is not that different than the way I approach them now. And it's so much about just being patient, which is different, right? Again, kind of back to what we were saying in terms of the grind mentality. In a 10K, if you're trying to grind from the first lap and you got 24 laps to go and you see on lap counter, you're probably not going to make it through the whole race. And if you do, it's not going to be pretty. So in the 10, it's really about just trying to find that fine line of like, okay, I feel like I'm running as fast as I can without necessarily knowing how I'm going to feel in the last 4 laps, but knowing I can get there. So my specific mental approach is I don't look at the lap counter for 10 laps. So I don't look at it. I normally break it, it's really hard to not count laps at all. So I normally try to break them into like 2Ks. So I try to go through 5 without like looking at the clock or anything like that. And 2K is a pretty hard split to calculate in your head. So when you look at the clock, it doesn't really mean anything to you anyways. So I try to find a place where I know like, okay, I feel quite comfortable early in the race. If I'm like, when I'm really fit, I can get away with a quick lap or 2 at the beginning. And then it's really about like settling it in and staying calm. So 5K is a huge benchmark. Once you get to 5K and see that split, you kind of have a pretty good idea of, okay, I feel really good. And that split's good, solid too. When I was at NCAAs in the 10K, I remember coming through exactly in 14:17. And I remember looking at that clock and being like, all right, I'm going to break the Michigan school record today, which I didn't, but I thought I was going to. So, that moment right there can be super encouraging. And for the 10K, for me, it's like a crescendo, right? Like you really want like the closer you come to seeing 1 lap to go, you really want that momentum to keep building because, it's not so much about just getting across the finish line. Like you have to get to the bell lap and then you got to close in a 57 or a 56. So you got to get there. Point number 1, the endurance side of it. And then you got to be ready to go again. So as I said before, I kind of go groups of 5 laps. Once I get to about 10 laps to go, that's when I start counting down like 9, 8, 7, 6. And once I get to 4 laps to go, it's really about just like, all right, just get through this lap. 3 laps to go, just get through this lap. And then when it's 2 to go, it's just get to the bell. And then once you get there, that's really all you can ask for. So the last thing I'll kind of say with that, I know that was quite confusing, and that is kind of represents my brain during a 10K. It's like a balancing act of, oh, I feel great and this is awesome. Oh my God, I still have 6K to go. Oh wait, don't think about that. So you're kind of playing that game of trying to, not get too anxious, but also utilizing that energy in a positive way. But when I was really focusing on winning races, like the NCAAs and the Falmouth Road Race, some of my more notable wins in my career, my mindset wasn't actually even to win. It was just to be in it at the point where I needed to go. So I focused on just getting to the bell. If I could just get to the bell in the lead pack, instinct will take over. I'm not even going to make decisions at that point. I'm just going to let my body take over. And same with the Falmouth Road Race. It was just get to a mile to go. So as long as I put myself in it, I wouldn't be upset with how I ran, because I gave myself the opportunity to win rather than focusing solely on winning or not winning. It was put yourself in a position where you can. And if you have it on a day, you'll capitalize on it. And if you don't, which I've had very many experiences like that as well, you can't be too hard on yourself because you really went for it. So try to digest all that information. That's quite a bit.
A great point about focusing on the execution of it rather than the final result, right? And it sounds like when you did focus on that, that's actually when you had your best performances and results on it, for sure. And I think when you say like, it's like, okay, just make it to that mark and then drop the final hammer. I mean, that's what you did when you won your NCAA title, right? You hung there and then you just ran away that last lap. Probably on adrenaline.
Yeah, on something. Yeah, I was. Yeah, that was apparently my mom's encouragement, Haywood Field magic, and a little bit of Sully's training all mixed together in all the right ways. So it worked out quite well.
Yeah, that's amazing. And also touching on everything you just said too. I think staying relaxed for as long as possible too. And I found when I jumped up, I have not done a 10K on the track. I don't think I'm mentally there yet. I've done it on the road.
Oh, you are. You would be. If you did it, you are. You're there.
Oh, thanks. Well,
it's whether you want to be there. That's the question. You are there. It's a matter of if you want to be.
I guess so. I'm enjoying the 5K right now. So stick to that. But even going up from 1,500 to 5K, I find that resonates with me what you said about not looking at the laps, viewing it more as like per kilometer, or just being more in tune with your body, how it's feeling. Because a big thing with, distance is it's not hard the first few laps, right? So it's a really big test of, okay, stay patient and then, gradually ramp it up and then have enough fuel at the end to be excited and really go.
Yeah, because you always want to keep moving forward, and you can always move forward. That's the thing, right? So if you go forward too early, the concern is if you start going backwards, because usually once you start going backwards, it's hard to start going forwards again. So for me, it's about like, even if I feel that like, oh, I can definitely go faster right now, it's like the discipline of holding back until it's the right time to. And by all means, by the way, to clarify, I know you're absolutely crushing the 5K right now. I'm saying you could handle a 10 and crush it, but you were running phenomenal in the 5 right now, so you're in the right place. But if you wanted to, you could crush a 10.
Thanks. Maybe one day. We'll see. Yes.
Nice. I look forward to it.
And on that, I was wondering, Ben, do you have any like mantras you say while you race, little words of encouragement? Or Isaac, is that something, conversations with your athletes to help? Because I know from kind of sprint or shorter distance, when you're going into long distance, like I said, there's a lot more time, and it's a total different approach to the racing, right? Like I remember when I started dating my fiance, he's a swimmer, but he was a sprinter, and he said, just go out with the lead pack, right? Like just go out as fast as you can. And I feel like in any sport, that's really more of a sprinter's perspective. So adjusting, is that something, Isaac, you're kind of like, okay, throw them into a situation, learn from experience to really get that point across? Or is it through training? What kind of approach do you take?
Good question. I think the first thing when it comes to mantras or how to stay disciplined and all that is trusting the training you've done, in terms of you can be patient because you're fit, and you don't have to do anything stupid. You don't do anything like, I think sometimes the worst mentality you can have is going into a race is, I've got it, like, this is all it, like, there's nothing more important than this, like, nothing will freak you out more than that. Like, I think it's so much of, trusting your training, focusing on things that you can actually control. Like you can actually control how competitive you are. You can control how tough you are, and you can control how disciplined you are. You cannot control what's happening around you. Like, you don't know how fit these other people are in your races. So you could be having the best day of your life and you could still lose. You could break the Canadian record and get beat. But and so much of I think the mentality I try to help athletes I coach with is you can control being tough, being competitive, being disciplined. And I think all those kind of answer your question of those are the mantras you got to have. I'm tough. I can be patient. I can do this.
Yeah,
A
I'm
lot of
ready.
times what?
And I'm ready.
And
Yeah.
I'm ready. Let's go. Right. I'm celebrating my fitness. Okay. I like to tell my 10K or 5K guys and gals, like, buy a ticket and ride the train. You just hop on the train and you just don't think, you just get in there. And when the train moves, you move with it. Right. And let someone else lead.
Yeah.
And just buy a ticket and ride the train.
Definitely. I think that's something during, COVID, because of lack of competitions, but we've had some time trials where we've been really lucky to have pacers, whether it's females, males, or bikes, like last year, and just being able to completely zone out and, like you said, just ride the train and see how far you can go, really just help gain confidence, I think, to see what you're capable of. But just prove that, like, just go in there, be confident in your fitness, know that you can do it, and just execute, and that will bring, regardless of what the result is, you did everything you can to put yourself in the best situation.
Right.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess next with, injuries, we haven't really touched on that is very common, like I said, during your college years. And how do you, help your athletes through that, or with, the mental aspect of it? I think it's really tough during those years, because oftentimes athletes, they're competing for, spots on their team. They're trying to make championships. They have this sense of wanting to prove themselves, compared to post collegiate, where you're kind of like controlling your controllables. You are running for you, right? It's different. There's a lot more pressure in those college years, I find.
Yeah, I think the injuries is always hard, especially when you're on a team with a significant amount of people on it. When it's more one-on-one, I think it can be, you feel more supported. It's really hard when you're one of 20, 25 people, especially in the college level, where most people that's the case. And you want your coach checking in on you. You want that attention. You want to feel like, although you're hurt, it's okay. And I think you're never going to get enough of that. And so you need to learn to be okay with, like, almost like self-soothing tactics, like almost like what I did with my kid when he was like 3 months old, and take that freaking binky away and you figure it out, kid. It's similar, where it's like you need to kind of learn, like, how you cope with stressful situations, including injuries. And I think it's a great base for your life, because we all have hard stuff you have to deal with. And if the hard thing you have to deal with in college is an injury, it kind of even brings some perspective. But just staying religious in your routine with cross training, listening to your physios or athletic trainers. And if you can do those things, again, it kind of goes back to the control what you can, keep the main thing, and if you, and so if it's biking, if it's swimming, if it's hydro works, if it's ultra G, if it's just, you can run on land, but you got to see the physio after, doing what you're supposed to do and learning how to cope without your coach or physio's involvement. And then when you get that feedback from your coach or your physio that you're dying for, it really helps you just push forward even more.
Definitely. So just, I think what you're saying, like trusting the process and having confidence that those steps are going to bring you to the goal you're doing, right? And I think if we look back at like the mental toughness through that, I think we often talk about like pushing hard and getting through this, but I think a big part of it too is being smart, and like the almost, I guess it's kind of a mental toughness of like, okay, just know that I need to like stop and make the right decision, because I think that is one of the biggest difficulties for college athletes to just take a step back, listen, because they're so caught up in the moment rather than controlling themselves there as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I
Go
think
ahead,
that
Ben.
makes a lot of sense. It takes a lot of discipline. Again, I just feel like as athletes, our development is so the foundation of our development is work as hard as you can. And there's
Mhm.
also come, and that works really, really well when you're young age and you're durable and things like that. And as you get older, you gotta be able to identify your limitations as well. And it's kind of about finding that line of, okay, how can I get the best of myself without going over it? And hopefully, if you're in a situation where you got injured, you come back from that experience kind of having a better idea of where that line is, so that when you do adjust your training accordingly, you can maybe brush up on it instead of crossing it over and ending up in the same position that you were during that setback. So I think that's a big part of it, is being able to not take being healthy for granted and understand that when you are back healthy, you got injured, right? And being able to like really realize that and know, okay, I can get injured. It is a real possibility. And how can I make sure I get the most out of my training while, trying to avoid another setback like that and learn from your previous experiences is something that I think is pretty important as well once you make it through the first injury.
Definitely. Ben, have you experienced, I guess I've always seen you successful in all these races, but you must have battled some injuries over the years.
Oh, you don't even know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, tell me. But I think it's
Yeah.
you always see athletes like performing at their best, and I think it's this idea that like these top athletes, they never get injured, like when you're younger, more naive. But realizing that it really is a part of our sport, especially in the longer distances. I know on average it's like distance runners are supposed to get so many injuries, like once every 2 years or something, just
Yeah.
something. But it's all about managing those, right? But I think it's great to hear the stories that you've been through, because it's not just an easy journey, right? Like it's something we're always dealing with. And
Yeah. For sure. Injuries have totally shaped my career. It's a big part of my career at this point. And, I was super durable in high school. I didn't really get hurt that much. And, you know, I didn't even realize. I remember someone like I had a conversation with someone like an alum at Michigan, and they made a comment to me once, being like, "Oh yeah, it's been such a shame to see you injured so often." And I was like, "Wait, what the heck? When did I become the injured person?" Like I like in my head, I was like, I started thinking about it. I was like, "Wow, I guess I have." Like it kind of felt like every 6 months, like it was something else and another thing, and so, I've got a bunch of small setbacks that happen throughout my career, and those can be very annoying because there's no timeline and it's a really difficult gray area of when to come back and how long to rest. But the two major injuries I faced throughout my career is my fourth year of college, the year before I had the most success. I got a stress fracture in my sacrum, which is in the lower back, and that just sucks.
painful.
Yeah,
True.
it hurts. It hurts. Putting on a pair of pants, that's like the telltale sign. You try to put on a pair of pants and you can't even like stand up. So it hurts so bad. And I ran it to the point that it was, I couldn't walk. That was like how bad it got. So that's 4 months off the bat, no running or very limited running.
Mhm.
And for me, it was a pretty hard time to know, like, well, what is my life without running? You know what I mean? Like, what do I do? Like, this is significant, the most time I'll ever have without running be a part of my life. And there's multiple ways I address that. Some very related to rehab and cross training, but in just the mental health side of things, I started to learn how to play guitar because I've never played guitar before, and like for me, I was missing out like on a sense of the process and getting better at something. So the two takeaways from that injury for me, some sort of outlet. I talked to my family a lot. I play guitar. That stuff was really nice to just get away from the track when I was having a bad day and just didn't even want to see a track, for another 24 hours until I had to go back. But and the other thing was what was I gonna say? Um, I loved swimming because swimming for me, it was the closest thing that I got with running. The stationary bike and the aqua jogging, it's so time based, but it's hard to really see any sort of improvement. But swimming, I was able to, do 50 meter laps or 50-yard laps and, measure, I started at, 41 seconds and I can get down to 38. And that was another thing that like I was used to and I really enjoyed. But kind of what Isaac was saying, the isolation point is pretty difficult on a big team. So, as a team captain at Michigan and being an injured athlete, it was a big part of my experience trying to figure out like, okay, I'm going through a really tough time, but how do I still try to be a role model, encourage others? And for us, we kind of had an injured crew for the distance running world. Usually if you're injured, you're not the only person injured. There's other guys as well. And, we made a group chat, and we made it really important to, share our workouts every day in that group chat, just so all of us were getting some level of recognition for the work we were putting in. Because at the end of the day, when everyone's crushing workouts, no one's really wondering, what someone's doing, aqua jogging, 30-second intervals, right? So for us, we kind of gave that validation to each other that, hey, I see what you're doing and you're getting better, and I appreciate the hard work. And that was really encouraging for me, and, very uplifting. And it was ironic considering, I kind of facilitated that process, and I was probably the one that ended up benefiting from it the most, that support system. So, but yeah, and then the last thing I'll say is that was in college, and my first year as a pro, I got a femoral stress fracture. So another really bad one that I just, had to take the time I needed. And as a pro, it's a little bit different. As Isaac was saying earlier, it's a little bit more personal and reflective, and you don't really feel the loss of not being able to impact a team and things like that, but it's still difficult, losing running again. And for me, I think that was something that I really needed to look at my lifestyle and make sure I was getting the nutrition I needed and things like that. To have a history of, two big bone injuries, a big part of coming back from that was realizing, hey, maybe I'm not getting all the nutrition I need to make sure I can train hard at a sustainable level. And, addressing that has been really helpful, and, kept me healthy for, knock on wood, the longest stretch I've had in a long time. So, I've learned a lot, and I'm trying to still apply things to my life every day that I learned through those experiences.
Mhm. Wow. So you have definitely experienced your injuries.
I have, yeah. Yeah. It's, quite a bit. So, yeah, the last thing I'll say is, I just think momentum is so important. So it's like, there's times in my life where I wanted to win NCAAs, for example, or win Big Tens, really big goals. But there's points in my injury comeback where, it was a big deal for me to break 3 minutes in a kilometer or 5 minutes in a mile. And being able to understand where you're at and where, those incremental goals you need to hit on way to, a big accomplishment, I think is really important to give yourself credit and build that momentum towards a comeback from injury. So, I would tell people to stay positive and really acknowledge your progress in times like that.
I think that's a huge point, and I can really relate to that because, like as Ben said at the beginning, I had quite a lot of success early on in high school, and then I hopped on this roller coaster of injuries throughout high school and university. And there was a point where, like Ben, it's like, oh, you have these goals of doing big things, but you go to university, you're in a bigger pond, and you kind of have to take a step back and reflect, like, okay, let's look at like the little games there, right? And focus on that. And I think that is huge from like an athlete to realize, and for coaches really to emphasize, because that's what's going to bring joy and like fun to the process of it, right? Because you can't push too hard too fast. And from a mental side of it, I just think that really enhances their experience, as well. And I find, I guess I have a question for you, Isaac, because dealing with athletes, obviously you can't control them getting injured. There's so many variables, given them entering like this new time in their life. How do you, I guess, go about encouraging them through injury or supporting, as a coach?
Yeah, I think in that regard, actions speak louder than words, and so it's time spent. Sometimes you have to go to the training room and just hang with some of your injured kids and just chat with them, shoot the breeze with them, try to get to know what's happening in their lives beyond running and school. And
Mm-hmm.
I think just having a coach that you love and that you want to run hard for and be successful for, I think can help push you through needing to get through some of the hard times of being injured. And I think also trying to rekindle the love of the sport, because you can lose it. You can lose that when you're hurt. You haven't really felt the magic of racing and the magic of success. You have to kind of help keep them, help them kind of rekindle the fire if they lose it. And I think if you can do that, you can keep people. You can get a Ben Flanagan who might be hurt but end up being a national champ. You can kind of keep
Mm-hmm.
those type of talent levels that have something big in them. You can keep them going because that kind of support is massive for them making it through.
Definitely. And I think it makes more resilient athletes too, right? And more appreciation and just like long term for that as well, which definitely resonates with me too. And I think in a coach's situation too, it must be hard sometimes because obviously you work with this athlete for, 4 or 5 years and you want to see them perform the best. So it must be tempting to like, get them training, working hard, but also keeping that long-term vision in mind. And then I guess how do you gauge that? I guess working with the athlete, again, controlling those controllables, that must be like all you can do, right? For them to reach success university and long term after as well.
I think it's important to note the reason and the purpose behind every workout you do, and staying focused on what that is and what the objective is. I think people get hurt when when they overtrain and it's overuse. It's just doing stuff too much. And when I was at Weber State coaching, the very first time I did a workout, I coached a workout with Paul Pilkington, who's the coach there. He was like the LA Marathon champ in like the '90s. He's a really good coach, and I remember though they were doing a workout and they were 2 seconds too fast for the first quarter, and he shut the whole thing down. Shut the whole thing down and explained to every single person the purpose of the workout and said that's why you need to run the pace. And man, that whole group, that workout nailed it. And that only happens to you once or twice, right? Like, then you forever just do whatever the coach says the workout is. You just do it because it's almost embarrassing. It's stupid. You're like, you feel kind of weird. It's awkward. But I think that is a great way to help at least mitigate injuries. Nothing more, to be honest, nothing more disheartening as a coach than feeling like you're the reason someone got hurt. Even if you had nothing to do with it, if you're their coach, it looks like, oh, he gets all these people hurt, huh? Okay, cool. Yeah, don't want to run for that guy. Like you can't control some of that, but you can some, and so you control the most that you can by keeping the objective of the workout in line with what actually happens, and trying to avoid any kind of overtraining stuff. And I think that can be massive for mental toughness too, mental strength of like if you're making them run these precise things and workouts and they're hitting the paces that you want, they can be like, wow, like I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do, and it can give you confidence heading into a race that like I've nailed these workouts, I know I'm fit, and that's a big part of mental toughness and strength.
That's totally true, and just bringing that mental confidence into competition as well. But I love that story, and it definitely does prove a point and sets the stage to just avoid that inner team competition too in workouts that I've definitely seen over the years as well. So there's a lot of talk on obviously supporting with physical, controlling the workouts is very easy. I'm wondering if you think there's enough focus in the sport on the mental side as well. So support for athletes at the collegiate level. It sounds like, Isaac, you do a really good job at trying to connect with the athletes on that level, understand them, and be there for them. But for injuries like physical, you can send them to physio, massage. Do you find there's kind of equal access there for mental support? Because obviously you can't take on everything and there's only so much conversation advice you can give on that end.
Yeah, certainly I'm not certified or qualified to give any kind of real mental health coaching outside of just supporting and loving everyone you work with and helping them feel like you, at least if you can take yourself out of the equation of being the reason why their mental health isn't good, right? But on top of that, certainly there needs to be more. Even it's better the last couple of years than it has been over the last hundreds of years of NCAA sports, but or college sports, university sports. But I do think that it can ever be improved, and there's probably not enough access to sports psychologists or counselors or therapists that there needs to be for the amount of people who need the help. And so I think certainly, and I think this is a good wrap for our conversation in terms of talking about mental health, is that if you have struggles, if you think you have struggles, if you're not sure if you have struggles, you probably do. You need to see someone because they will help you. It's a humbling thing. It's not easy, but it can be the difference between going into a really bad place and or finding yourself coming out of it.
Yeah, definitely, I agree. And even if you don't think you need it, I think everybody can benefit, just like everybody would benefit going to see a physio to improve their mechanics, right? And especially when you bring it to high performance as well, there's always going to be that kind of competitive edge that you'll get from it. And that reminds me of a documentary. I don't know if you guys have seen it, but the HBO sport documentary, The Weight of Gold. Have you guys seen
I,
it? Touches on the mental health challenges of that Olympic athletes face, and really highlights that importance and, you know, the struggle to access that, you know, mental support in sport, because whether it's, you know, high school, collegiate, post-Olympic even, like it is very, very important to be able to access and support our athletes with. Have you guys seen that one?
I haven't seen it.
No, I've never seen it, to be honest, but I'll
Ah,
check it out.
yeah, I recommend it. It was a bit of a loophole to try and find, but it's on, yeah, HBO sport documentary, and it's actually Michael Phelps who narrates the whole thing, but highlights
Okay.
athletes from all different sports, and really shines light, especially on, you know, this year with the Olympics being postponed, how that's affected a lot of people. Because for some, it was kind of blessing in disguise, but for others, it was going to be the last year of, you know, their career. So it really highlights a lot of different notes there as well. Well, it's been great chatting with you. I feel like we could continue on this conversation, but I think for sake of time, we'll start wrapping it up. But before we end it, Ben, what's next on the calendar for you? What's coming up this spring?
Yeah, just given the times right now, scheduling is always a little bit dynamic in terms of racing. But as far as things go right now, I may be opening up my outdoor season with a little 1500 action just locally here. I'm in the same city as the University of Virginia, and that gives us access to some meets in town if they're hosting. So I may hop in that. That's not confirmed yet. And then after that, I'm hoping to run a couple 5Ks and try to get close to that standard, or at least improve my ranking to give me a shot to represent Canada at the Olympics. And then it'll be about coming home to run at the trials. So that's a general outlook, but I'm really looking forward to getting racing again after some good weeks of training.
Yeah, I can imagine. Exciting year with Olympics coming up for sure. And it's up in the air for Olympic trials for you too, is it? I think they're sending out those invitations for Canada that
Oh,
don't determine whether you're going to the Olympics or not. But it's an interesting criteria this year, isn't it?
yeah. I've got full plans on running the trials. So
Okay.
yeah, I'm trying to organizing my planning accordingly. Because yeah, for anyone listening, I'm currently living in the U.S. So traveling to Canada for the trials is definitely going to be an event. But I really want to be there, and I'm making sure I understand all the criteria from a public health standpoint and from the Athletics Canada standpoint to make sure I get there while following all protocols. So it means it's going to be a long trip, but I'm looking forward to it.
Yeah, all the more reason to visit the family in Canada, right? And
Yeah.
yes, coming to Canada, we have the mandatory 2-week quarantine. So you'll have a lot of family time there, Ben. Well, hopefully I'll be crossing paths with you at some point in the States. I'm heading there next week to also compete in some fun opportunities, racing 5K as well. So
Nice.
seeing what I can do in that. And Isaac, how can I guess, what do you have coming up this spring, and how can people keep an eye on the Wood Report moving
Yeah,
forward?
I have a group that I coach that will be unattached. They're allowing club unattached at the Brian Clay Invite next weekend in California. So we'll take a group there, a small group, and otherwise, the Wood Report just keeps grinding out, ratings on track races, and we're looking forward to seeing how much they can benefit coaches and how they utilize the transfer portal and how they prep and recruiting and how they can get their teams ready to be, to improve from this past cross country season. So it was honestly a pleasure speaking with both of you, and my knowledge and brain has been enhanced in how to better coach and work with my athletes for mental strength and mental health stuff. So thank you guys, appreciate it.
Thank
Yeah.
you, Isaac. It's always a pleasure.
Yeah, thank you, Isaac. It was a pleasure to connect with you guys. And like I said, give us a follow on Instagram at streamlineathletes.com to stay up to date with all of the educational articles about recruitment journey for athletes to create profiles for free. And for any collegiate coaches there, feel free to connect with Ben here if you're interested in learning how Streamline athletes can help make recruiting easier for you. So again, thank you, and Have a great evening, everybody.
Thank you. See ya.